Hi everyone. So today we're going to be setting up systems of equations from context, basically meaning from word problems. We're not going to be solving them today. We're just going to be identifying which variables we're going to use and setting up the equations. Okay, so setting up system of equations from context. Create a system of equations based on the word problem below. Okay, so Mackenzie and her children went into a movie theater and she bought $99.50 worth of popcorn and candy. Each bag of popcorn cost $8.50 and each candy cost $4. She bought a total of 17 bags of popcorn and candies altogether. Write a system of equations that can be used to determine the number of bags of popcorn and the number of candies that Mackenzie bought. Define the variables that you will use to write the system. So that's going to be the first thing that we do. We're going to identify the two things that we're talking about here and give them variables. And remember, a variable is a letter that represents an unknown number. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to just highlight some important information. So she bought $99.50 worth of bags of popcorn and candy. So that's going to be a total. So that's super important. Each bag of popcorn costs $8.50. That's important. And each candy costs $4. And she bought a total of 17 bags of popcorn and candy altogether. Okay, so now let's define our variables. So hopefully you've noticed the two things that we're talking about here is popcorn and candy. So I'm going to say let me make this not a highlighter anymore. Sorry about that. Okay, so let P equal the number of popcorn bags sold or bought. Sorry, popcorn bags bought. And I'm just abbreviating here. So popcorn bags, popcorn, as long as this represents popcorn and how much popcorn Mackenzie bought for her and her children. Okay, and then the other thing we're talking about here is candy. So I'm going to say let's C equal the number of candies bought. Okay, so this is really important. These are our two variables that should show up in both of the equations that we're going to write for this scenario here. Okay, and here we're talking about two different things. We're talking about the amount of money that everything costs and then the total amount of things altogether that she bought. So I'm going to create, I like to call it a money equation, where all of our money values are going to go into one equation. Oops. So we have the number of popcorn, and we know popcorn costs $8.50. So it's going to be $8.50 times however many bags of popcorn that she bought, and we don't know that. So we have $8.50 times the amount of popcorn, which is represented by P. And we also want to include candy here. So we don't know how much candy she bought, but we know that it costs $4 each. We know that C represents candy. So we're going to add 4 times C. So $4 times the amount of candies that she bought, and that should give us a total of $99.50. Okay, so you can see I kept all of our money values together here. Now this isn't always going to happen for every question, just it's particular for this question. Not all questions are formed the same way. So we have $8.50 times the amount of popcorn plus $4 times the amount of candy, and that should equal that total of $99.50 that she bought, that was worth everything altogether. So the only thing we have left here is she bought a total of 17 bags of popcorn altogether. We can't just leave that 17 out, and that 17 is a really important part of the second equation that we're going to second equation that we're going to create. So we know that it's a total of 17 bags, so I know that my total here is going to be 17. Now, we don't know how much bags of popcorn and how many candies she bought, so it's just going to be the amount of popcorn plus the amount of candy. The quantity of those two together should equal 17. And this is your system of equations. You would normally go on to solve, but for the assignment that we have for you guys today, we're just setting up the equations. Okay, so we identified our variables, P and C, for popcorn and candy, and we use the information in our word problem to set up this system of equations. All right, we're going to take a look at one more example. Okay, so same thing, we want to create a system of equations, and we have to define the variables first. So Julia went to the grocery store and purchased cans of soup and frozen dinners. Each can of soup had 350 milligrams of sodium, and each frozen dinner had 500 milligrams of sodium. Julia purchased twice as many cans of soup as frozen dinners, and they all collectively contained 4,800 milligrams of sodium. Write a system of equations that could be used to determine the number of cans and soup purchased and the number of frozen dinners purchased. Define the variables that you use to write the system. So first, let's go in and highlight some important information. Okay, so we know that a can of soup has 350 milligrams of sodium, and frozen dinners have 500 milligrams of sodium. Just if you're not familiar, sodium just means salt. Okay. Julia purchased twice as many cans of soup as frozen dinners. So the word twice, that should stand out to you. That's a math word that we use a lot. So I'm going to highlight that. Twice as many cans of soup as frozen dinners. And they all collectively contain 4,800 milligrams of sodium. Okay, so now let's define our variables. Hopefully you notice the two things we're talking about are soup and frozen dinner. So I'm going to write let S equal the number of cans of soup bought and then I'm going to let F equal the number of frozen dinners bought. And you can use any variables here. It doesn't need to be S and F. You can use X and Y, but I like to use the letters so we know exactly which ones we're talking about. Number of frozen dinners. Okay. So now that we have our variables, those are the two variables that we're going to use in our system. So let's first talk about the amount of sodium we have here. So here we have a 350 milligram, 500 milligram, and 4,800 milligram. So those are all, because they're all talking about the same thing, which is the amount of a can of soup, the amount frozen dinner, and then all together, that's going to go into one equation here. So 350 is how much a can of soup has. So it's 350 times S plus 500 is how much a frozen dinner has. So we're going to have 500 F, and that equals that total of 4,800. Okay, so you notice that we're talking about all the same things. Milligrams, milligrams, milligrams. Everything's the same. Okay. Now the second one we're going to talk about is the fact that Julia purchased twice as many cans of soup as frozen dinners. So she bought a lot more soup than she bought double the amount of soup than frozen dinners. So when you think of the word twice, I want you to think of times 2. So we're going to take the amount of frozen dinners that she bought, we're going to multiply that by 2, and that equals how many cans of soup she bought. Okay, so this is how we're going to set it up. The amount of soup is equal to 2 times the amount of frozen dinners she bought. That's how you set that up. We know that she bought more cans of soup, so that's why we're multiplying the frozen dinners. Okay, and then this is our system of equations. From here, we would usually go on to solve, but we're only setting this up. So make sure you define your variables. Talk about the two things that are being discussed here, soup and frozen dinners. Remember to keep everything all together, milligrams, milligrams, milligrams. And then here we were talking about the quantity, how much she bought altogether, and the amount of cans of soup is equal to double the amount of frozen dinners. Okay, good luck.